Starting now. Okay, hi there. My name is Renee Hobbs and welcome to Social Media Literacy and Prevention. This is a Media Smart seminar featuring Haley Dunn. Today's date is May 23rd, 2016. And for about the next 60 minutes, we're going to learn from Haley about her research on the topic of social media literacy and prevention. And we're going to have time for a robust dialogue and discussion. So why don't we start by introducing ourselves to each other. So Haley, can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Sure. So my name's Haley Dunn. I'm happy to be here, excited to talk about the research that I've done so far. I am a PhD student in URI's clinical psychology program, but doing my dissertation work around, as you'll see tonight, social media literacy, and also health communication campaign stuff around underage drinking, marijuana use. And again, you'll see that sort of come out in the talk tonight.
Nice. And Haley, can you stop sharing your screen for the moment?
Sure. Let me see if I can.
Do you see how to do that up at the top there? Or it'll say stop screen sharing.
Okay.
There you are. So now we get to see you in person. Okay, so Zoe, I'll ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe Wang. I am a PhD student in the education program at University of Rhode Island and Rhode Island College. I am also a member of the Media Education Lab. My research focus is in media literacy, youth media production, and creativity. I'm so happy to be here and look forward to this wonderful webinar tonight. Thank you.
We're so glad you're here. And now I want to introduce Paul Florin. Paul, will you introduce yourself to us, please?
Oh, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Florin. I'm a faculty member in the psychology department in the clinical area and know next to nothing about social media. So I've been very excited to learn from Haley and Renee and others. Nice to be here.
We're very glad you're here. I see we've got a 2-for-1 with the threesomes, the media literacy power couple, driving but present. Lisa, will you first introduce yourself, and then Yanti, will you second introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lisa Friesen, Native Faculty of the Media Education Lab, recent graduate from a doctoral program at Temple University, Media Communication. And the focus of my research is on media literacy education and issues of diversity and sexuality.
Welcome. And Yanti?
Hi, I'm Yanti Friesen. I'm driving. I'm the Associate Director of the Media Education Lab, just finished my PhD at the University of Rhode Island, program in PhD in Education, and I'm an Assistant Professor at Central Connecticut State University, interested in media production and how to bring conflict management through media production and more civic engagement.
Wonderful. Now I'm so delighted to welcome Deborah Perlman to the group. Deborah, can you introduce yourself to us?
So I'm delighted to join this event. I have to tell you, I can't get the sound to work with the picture, so I'm actually using the phone and looking at the picture. I'm an associate professor at Brown University in the School of Public Health, and it's a pleasure to serve on Haley's PhD committee with the rest of you.
We are so glad you're here. So what we think we're going to do tonight is we're going to ask Haley to talk a little bit about her work for about 20 minutes or maybe a little bit longer. And then we're going to have a dialogue where we can kind of ask her questions and reflect on what we learned from her talk and hopefully bring our own insights from our own different backgrounds and areas of expertise. So Haley, we are so glad you're here. Before you start your presentation, can you give us a little sense of like, why this topic has captured your imagination and interest?
Whew, that's a tough question. So the topic actually, my idea in terms of health communication research, it's always sort of been there. My background is in public health. That's actually how I know Deborah Perlman. She served on my committee when I got my master's at Brown. So always interested in health communication. I actually started out more so interested in dating violence and campaign development around dating violence, and then working on a project for Dr. Florin, sort of emerged into more substance-related, health communication stuff. So you'll see that tonight in terms of the talk that I give, but always sort of interested in health communication. And also online identity. And, we think a lot about our identity in the physical world, but really what it looks like in the online world and how that's portrayed to other people. And when I was younger, social networking sites weren't around. So I'm interested in really how it's impacting teenagers today. And it's sort of this fingerprint that will follow them throughout the rest of their life. So just kind of thinking about what does that mean sort of longer term.
Nice. It's a topic that many of us are interested in, and thinking about different pedagogical strategies for how to intervene in the way kids think about and use social media. So we're so glad you're here. So you can share your screen now, and we turn the floor over to you.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me just see. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about tonight is social media literacy and prevention. And as you'll see, actually, I think my talk comes out to about 25 minutes just in terms of timing. As you'll see, a good chunk of my talk is actually going to be around campaign development. So just to give a little bit of context, I'm working on a grant right now where we're in several different communities in Rhode Island, trying to find ways to reduce underage drinking and marijuana use among adolescents, youth, primarily ages 12 to 17. So basically, some of the communities that we're working with, they're looking at campaign strategies to reduce substance use. So again, you'll see as I have on the slide, when I refer to substance use tonight, I'm pretty much going to be referring to underage drinking and marijuana use. So again, we have this grant because, as we know, substance use among this population continues to be a major public health.
Not to interrupt, Haley, but we are not seeing your slides.
Oh, okay.
So just take a minute and go down to the bottom of the screen where it says share screen.
Okay, let's see. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay. How about now? Are you seeing my?
Now we see your beautiful dog. Now we see your beautiful slides. And once you do full screen, we'll be good to go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, sorry about that.
Bravo, bravo.
Okay, so as I was saying, so we know that substance use among this population, so 12 to 17-year-olds, continues to be a major public health problem. If we look at national level data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, we see that slightly more than half of teens are experimenting with alcohol by their first year of high school, and almost 2/3 experiment with alcohol by the time they reach their senior year. We also see with marijuana use, by the time kids reach the 12th grade, I think just under half report experimenting with marijuana use. So the coalitions we're working with right now, like I said, they're trying to figure out how to develop campaigns that will reach these kids. And there's a lot of interest now around how to use social networking sites. So for example, sites like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And the interest is really around, is generated from the potential reach in terms of accessing this population. So if we look at the data in terms of usage, 90% of teens access the internet daily, and 71% of teens are going online to use social networking sites. Another reason why there's a growing interest in using social networking sites is because there is some evidence that displays pro-alcohol related messages or other risky behaviors may actually be displayed online. So kids are posting about this stuff. So a couple of years ago, a study was done where a few hundred MySpace profiles were looked at amongst older adolescents, so sort of kids leaving high school or post-high school, and what they found was more than half of those profiles contained references to alcohol. And this is problematic because there's also some evidence that online behavior is correlated with offline behavior. So it's unclear if one causes the other. I suspect it's more so an interactional effect. So for example, kids might be drinking or engaging in risky behavior in the physical world, taking pictures, posting it online, and then other kids are viewing that stuff. Maybe there's some sort of influence there, and then those kids are deciding to engage in risky behaviors. And what happens is when these types of messages are displayed online, it can create norms. So it can create norms around risky behaviors. It can also maintain those norms. So when we think about social networking sites, it seems to be a good place for an intervention of some sort. So now some organizations have tried to create social networking site interventions. There was a study done a couple years back where they created a dating violence campaign, and what they found in their analysis was that they missed the target population, which was teenagers. So they had other organizations, they had adults kind of following the campaign, but kids really weren't engaged. So I wanted to understand why, and even in terms of, talking to some of the communities on the grant that I'm on right now, there's a challenge in terms of trying to get kids actually engaged online in whatever messages they're disseminating. So the overarching aim of the work that I've been doing is basically to conduct a formative analysis of how to create substance prevention social media campaigns using social networking sites that successfully reach and engage high school students. And what I mean by engage is getting kids to actually create messages, post messages, and share these types of messages online as part of a campaign. So within that, I have some sub-aims that I was interested in. So I use this conceptual model or this conceptual framework that message developers or campaign developers, when you have the ability to input 3 variables. So when you're developing a campaign. So the first would be you can manipulate the source of the message or the messenger. So for example, who's in the message or who's sending the message, that can suggest a lot. You also have the ability to manipulate the content of the message and then also the channel. So here I was interested in what within social networking sites, what platforms were being used most frequently. So in terms of specific questions I was asking, I wanted to know, what would it take if we look at the source or the messenger, what are some barriers or facilitators of kids wanting to actually participate and engage in the campaign? And then in terms of content, I wanted to know what types of content within the message did kids think would be most effective in an anti-substance prevention campaign? And then again, channel, just looking at maybe what type of social networking site we'd want to really zero in on for the campaign dissemination piece. So then there was sort of this supplemental aim, and I will give credit to Professor Hobbs. So this came out of her idea. So for the research that I did, it was qualitative research, and we conducted a series of focus groups, which I'll get into in a couple minutes. But we also wanted to know, as sort of a supplemental aim, was whether just participating in the focus group discussion, which would be centered on how social networking sites influence risky behavior or just behavior in general, can actually serve as a social media literacy intervention. And here, what I mean by social media literacy for the purposes of this presentation is giving kids the skills or the ability to deconstruct pro-alcohol and other substance-related messages their peers or other teens post online. Okay, so we're still in the process of data collection, but what we're doing right now is we're using a convenience sample, and we're recruiting kids from communities we're already working with through this grant. So these kids are involved in community-based or after-school youth programs. They are in high school, and I think the projected sample, once we've collected everything, I'm projecting up to 40 students will have participated. I'm hoping for 5 focus groups altogether. It's looking like 4 at this point, but still hoping for the 5th. So what we do is we've been conducting a 1-hour semi-structured focus group discussion. We digitally record and transcribe the discussion, and then it's facilitated by myself and then also the help of a second moderator, my colleague James Day. He's been very helpful. He records nonverbal cues, also backup transcription. And then at the end of the discussion, we administer a brief self-administered questionnaire, which takes less than 5 minutes. So I'll present tonight the preliminary results. So just keep in mind these results are preliminary. I'm still sort of immersing myself in the data. I haven't actually begun the formal coding process yet, but I'm going to talk about some of the themes that appear to be most salient at this time. So right now, I've met with 26 different individuals with a total of 3 focus groups. My population is predominantly Latino or Latina. One of the focus groups was all girls, the other was all boys, and then the third was actually a mix of gender. And these kids tend to come from a more urban environment. I'm not going to disclose the community just for confidentiality purposes, but that's just to give you sort of an idea of some of the demographics that I'm working with. And then of those that I've spoken with, 69% are female, and they tend to be in more of the higher grades within the high school. So in terms of use, 85% of the teens said they use at least 2 types of social networking sites, and 92% of them said they use social networking sites often, or in other words, several times a day. And then interestingly, more than half, so about 62% of teens say they see people their age posting messages about drinking or getting drunk and smoking marijuana often or always. So this is interesting because, again, to my knowledge, no research has looked at exposure, online exposure amongst this population. So it suggests that this is really an area we should be thinking about intervening on. So if we get back to that initial input variable I talked about, so I wanted to, my initial question was, how might different individual or social factors influence teens' willingness to serve as the source of the message? So in other words, what are the reasons kids might or might not want to participate in the campaign by creating and sharing messages as part of the campaign? So some of the barriers was the first one that was the most salient was this idea of looking uncool. So to post an anti-substance message on social networking sites, kids were pretty consistent across the board saying, you know, that's not going to look cool. And also this concern about getting judged by their friends, sort of going against the norm. There was also a lack of an incentive. So one of the motivators, it seems, behind kids wanting to post things online is to try to get as much attention as possible. And they felt, you know, if we post, even if it's a positive health behavior, it's just not going to get a lot of attention. So for example, one boy had said, if I post, or every time I post a picture of me doing community service and my friend posted a picture of him smoking or something, he would get more attention. So again, it's the risky behaviors that kids really seem to be paying attention to. There was also some concern about shaming or offending friends. So if friends were using substances, there was a concern that they might cause some conflict in their relationships. And then this idea of cognitive dissonance. So I'm using 2 slides here. So for those who aren't familiar, cognitive dissonance is this idea that you may hold 2 contradictory beliefs or behaviors and it causes sort of an inner conflict within yourself. So if kids have already experimented with substances, they might not be, you know, highly motivated to post an anti-substance message online if it conflicts with previous behavior. And here's one of my favorite quotes that's come out of the focus group so far. So a young man had said, if you like something, that means you agree with that person's opinion or thought. If you share something, that means you think alike. And if you post something yourself, that means you endorse it 100%. So this quote was really cool in the sense that, you know, if we can get teenagers to post these messages as part of a campaign, then there's this idea that they really believe it, they're behind it, and that's great. However, getting them to that point seems really, really challenging. However, there are also some facilitators. So school climate certainly matters. So here's an example that I had showed the students in the focus group. This was part of Professor Hobbs's workshop that she had conducted with Portsmouth High, where we had done a thunderclap. And some of the kids said, you know, my school, we would be into it, but there was more of a cohesive feel between the students and the teachers. They had done fundraisers versus another student I had say, you know, kids wouldn't be into this. There's just not... Kids don't really work together or come together as a group. So certainly school climate is something that you'd want to be thinking about in terms of developing a campaign. Also thinking about incentives. So kids can be incentivized. So thinking about attention was a big one. So you could do a contest maybe where it would generate a lot of attention. I had also showed them examples of some of the Facebook pages and Instagram pages that had been developed by some of our community coalitions. And I had said, you know, what would it take to get you to like or follow these pages? And they said, well, you know, give us a prize or some sort of money incentive and we might do it. But there's a trade-off there, because when you provide an incentive, it could in some sense affect the believability of the message. And then also the message must align with values. So thinking about what's important to kids, they want to post things on their sites that are going to sort of represent themselves. One example they had given was, you know, if it was around prom season and maybe someone had gotten into a car accident from drinking and driving the year before, we might be able to come together around something like that. So it had to be something personal, something they could relate to. So it sort of speaks to this idea that when you're creating a campaign, you really want it to be close to home and something that's important to them that they can really relate to. In terms of content, certainly length of time matters. I had showed them on the right, you can see a snapshot from Above the Influence. The video was 1 minute and 30 seconds long, and they said, whoa, that's way too long. They said, no way. So they like features like such as on Snapchat. Some of the videos are only a couple seconds long, so that's something that to really be thinking about. Also, both the person sending the message and the person in the message must feel relatable and genuine. So, for example, this student, this was in response to the image on the right. She said, not to be racist, but almost after you see it, I don't know. It's just, I feel like most kids are going to relate to him because most of the kids who live from the hood are here. He's real. So again, thinking about certainly where you come from, what your culture is like, lining those things up with your target audience is extremely important, which is consistent with the marketing, the health communication research that we see. And then also something that came up was that kids are really looking for things that are either funny or that have a high shock value. So I did show them some images of memes that were around substance prevention that also came from Professor Hobbs's workshop. They really like the memes, but they also are drawn to things that are sort of explicit, really kind of get your attention. So for example, one student, I have to go between slides. I can't see everything on, let's see. So one student had said, there's pictures, I guess I would retweet sometimes, that there will be normal lungs and lung smoking, and that looks interesting because it's all nasty. That's interesting. This is in reference to smoking cigarettes. But the idea was, you know, that sort of shock value to it. So kind of I hadn't really thought of it that way. I was thinking maybe we need to go more down the road of like the route of positive health messages, but they said, no, we want things that are kind of shocking. So scare tactics sort of came up. So, and then finally, if we look at that third input variable, so I wanted to know what the current trends were across the different platforms. So as I mentioned earlier, most teens have, they use more than one type of social networking site. And then there are certain features that really influence the types of social networking sites that they're most drawn to. So audience was a big one. Facebook, they have this perception that the audience is pretty diverse. So it's family, friends, coworkers, where Snapchat and Instagram tends to have a younger audience. And there's also more privacy around, like, for example, Snapchat videos, quote unquote, disappear, as they had told me. So there's that privacy factor too. So kids really, they're drawn to social networking sites because it's their own space. So when they do think about their audience, they do think about their audience, and it does to some degree influence what they decide to share online. They also are really drawn to things that are fast and easy to use. Snapchat chat came up pretty frequently with regard to this feature, this idea of video logging, being able to easily share your story throughout the day. And then also the filters that are available through Snapchat. So for those who are not familiar with what filters are, you can add sort of these different features to your face that make you look kind of silly. Paul, I think you've had firsthand experience with filters.
Absolutely.
So, and they're fun, they get updated, so kids really like that. And it kind of ties back into that idea that they're drawn to things that are funny. So I had to take a step back for a minute because when I looked at some of the themes that came up, and I think I started to question after the second focus group, you know, it seems like there are a lot of valid concerns about teens not wanting to participate in a substance prevention social media campaign. So I had to ask myself, I mean, is this a realistic goal? So my focus had been, you know, how can we motivate kids to post positive health messages online? And I had to take a step back and say, well, maybe I'm approaching this all wrong. Maybe the goal isn't to get kids to post positive health messages. Maybe it's to get them to not post risky health behaviors. So instead of trying to figure out ways to develop a social media campaign, there really seemed to be this call for social media literacy intervention. So I have up here hashtag to post or not to post, just sort of to reiterate this idea, you know, the essence of qualitative research. You go in with one idea and you sort of come out in going down a different trajectory. Mm-hmm. So I went back to the drawing board and I looked at the data again, and I'd asked, you know, what social factors might discourage teens from posting alcohol and other substance-related messages on social networking sites? So what were some of their concerns? So one of their concerns was, you know, the negative influence it would have on their brothers and sisters, not wanting to be a poor role model. That was something that was important to them. There were also some short-term immediate consequences they were thinking about. So getting in trouble with parents, you know, if they post that they're drinking and then a parent sees it, obviously there's going to be some implications for that. And then also long-term consequences. So one student had said, you know, college admissions, they see what you post about and what you write about on Facebook, what pictures you post on Instagram, or what you write about on Twitter. And if you already give a bad impression, like swearing and posting inappropriate things, they'll reject you right away. So this boy was in the 10th grade and he was already sort of filtering what he was posting online, already thinking about what he wanted his online identity or his brand to represent. And although these concerns came up, there was still a little bit of pushback from kids saying, yeah, some kids think about the consequences, but, you know, they just don't really care right now. They just go with one student had said, you know, they just go with the wind. They're doing whatever. So no sense of urgency, no high perceived sense of self-risk, not really thinking about, you know, do I want to see this post 5 years from now? And how is this going to impact jobs or whatever? And actually, the implications for hiring didn't come up at all. So there is this idea, this call for sort of a social media literacy intervention. It's also a nice segue to talk about the last aim of the study, which was looking at whether just participating in small group discussions would serve as a social media literacy intervention. And so far, just from looking at some of the data I'll present here, it seems promising. So 65% of the teens that participated in the focus group said they hadn't really thought about how substance-related messages posted on social networking sites might encourage people their age to engage in underage drinking and marijuana use. And then 88% of teens said they have a better understanding of how the types of messages people post on social networking sites might influence their own attitudes and behaviors. 88% of teens also said they have a better understanding of how posting messages displaying underage drinking might encourage people their age to drink. And 84% said that they have a better understanding of how displaying marijuana use may encourage people their age to smoke. So again, this idea now that there's an increased awareness that there are norms that are happening online and how those norms may be influencing attitudes and behaviors. So just to wrap things up, so some of the overarching conclusions that I've drawn. So getting teens actively involved in anti-substance prevention social media campaigns is certainly ideal, especially if we can get kids to create messages and really get behind messages, but it's very difficult to accomplish. That's not to say that social media campaigns are unhelpful or that we should throw them out altogether. I'm certainly not suggesting that. But based on some of the data I've gathered here, maybe in terms of developing a social media campaign, we might want to go down the route of increasing awareness about the consequences of posting risky messages online, and maybe that does require some scare tactics, who knows. The other thing I think that's also sort of comforting that comes out of this data is, you know, when we're working with community coalitions right now, and if they're not successful in reaching their target population, well, now we have a better understanding of why. So it's helpful certainly to know that. And then thirdly, just this idea of not posting, so getting behind social media literacy versus allocating resources into campaign development that may offer actually more promising results. And then we also learned that just informal discussions may increase social media literacy. So just a brief intervention, a 1-hour intervention could be the way to go. I think in terms of future research, it'd be great to develop a more formal social media literacy curriculum, actually do an experiment where I have a comparison group to see some effect sizes. But certainly there seems to be a calling for it at this point. So that's all I have, so I'll take questions.
Wow, very, very nice. Thank you so much for sharing, Ailey. I am really looking forward to this discussion, and I'm especially intrigued about this idea that the discussion itself may have increased awareness. And actually, that's a topic that Lisa Friesen has written about, right? The idea of a focus group actually being a type of media literacy intervention. So Lisa, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about your own experience with that phenomenon, because you've also written about that and studied that. Can you tell a little bit more about that phenomenon of the focus group actually serving as an intervention?
Sure. Well, I had actually many different ideas as I was listening to this presentation. Do you hear me well?
Not well.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Your
earplug?
Yeah. Maybe better.
Okay. Let me try to plug my earbuds and talk into them. Okay, but it doesn't have. Never mind.
All right, it's okay.
Right. So, yes, I did research using focus groups. The initial idea of the research was to find out.
Okay, now we have lost you all together. So I'm so sorry that your sound is not working. But it is something, obviously, I will hope that you would continue to explore. Maybe let me ask one more question, then we'll invite other members of the webinar to chime in. Haley, you point out that kids might be willing to share substance abuse messages if there was an incentive, you say.
Mhm.
But you also point out that may backfire. Can you say more about why you would seem loath to enroll youth as essentially paid co-conspirators in a campaign development? I know that has been done before in the public health community, but you don't seem very keen on it. Can you say more about why?
I think part of it comes from, so when you think about the messenger, so you might have kids that are in the message, so they are part of the messenger, but then if you have a logo that represents some sort of organization also stamped on the message, or maybe a hashtag, that's affiliated with an organization, kids see that, so it can kind of take away some of that real, the genuineness that comes with the message. So yes, this kid is posting a message, but he's doing it because he's being asked to do it on behalf of an organization versus organically coming up with a message on your own. I think there's a little bit of a difference there.
Got it. So really it's this idea that if it's part of a larger campaign, it's inauthentic in a way. Right?
I think there is some possibility of that. And again, I don't want to dismiss the idea of campaigns altogether, because I certainly think that they are very valuable. But I do think that's something to sort of just to be thinking about, right, especially when we're asking ourselves why kids are not sharing or reposting messages to the extent that we're hoping them to do so.
Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's see if anybody else has comments or questions.
Well, I think that this is Paul, and I think that the obvious revelation, counterintuitive revelation, that we don't want to invest tremendous amounts of resources in trying to get teens to do something that doesn't come natural or might even have negative intended consequences, is already worth the price of admission of your focus groups, Haley. And I think that the idea of not doing something, like not posting, certainly not posting, if we remember that your informant said that posting means I 100% endorse this.
Right.
So at least not posting, perhaps not even liking. And the kind of thing that I'm thinking of, it sounds crude and very, very crude, but it's almost as though, think about people telling racist jokes. I mean, if you're around a group and people are telling racist jokes, you can do anything from call them out completely and say, how could you, in this day and age, this is terrible, to ignoring, not laughing, certainly not, carrying it on, and so on and so forth. So in some ways, I think that your fundamental concepts already that you've discovered are really going to be invaluable to the distribution of resources in the projects that you're involved in, because putting resources into things, I don't want to go on and on, but telling people don't put more resources into this can be just as important as saying what to do. So bravo.
Thank you.
That's a really great point. And the idea would be essentially renorming, or using kind of using education strategies to get kids to recognize that their liking behavior creates a social norm. And so maybe the focus of the education campaign is really on simply getting them to not like those silly posters or those silly images of kids drinking at parties. That is a very or at least understand the implications of how what you post creates social norms. That seems like a really powerful aha for some of these kids.
I think the other thing that's sort of come up for me is when we think about the relationship between offline behavior and how that translates into online behavior, even just getting kids to think about, if you do engage in underage drinking or marijuana use and you're around a bunch of friends or peers that you don't necessarily know that well, they can also take pictures of you and post those pictures online without your consent. So thinking about, again, sort of not only monitoring your behavior online, but also just kind of monitoring your behavior offline, because things get posted whether or not you like it sometimes. So
right. And it gets complicated by the phenomenon that kids like stuff that uses humor and is shock value. So,
right.
One reason why kids might put up with unflattering pictures of themselves when they're in an altered state is that they get attention. That gets attention, right? So there's that kind of metrics around, the positive, endorphins released from seeing that you're getting attention versus the longer term consequences. That seems like it might be a very challenging, tension to try to address with teens.
And that's why I think it'll be important to bring it back to their values and figuring out, what do they value short-term and long-term, and are they willing to compromise what it is they value for a short-term gain,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think you can hear us better now.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted one question that bothers me, because coming from a media production background, so I'm struggling with the notion of having a media literacy intervention that asks you not to produce anything or not. What was interesting for me was that one thing that Haley, you said about not being cool, that's like the big thing that draw this shocking kind of like pictures posting.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, so if there needs to be something that would be cool and engaging, I'm looking at like intervention that I've done with different group of adolescents to work in a group and kind of find incentive that can be a competition, a national competition, or a real target audience that will be maybe outside of their circle of friends and maybe an outside of their personal social net, to have like a positive behavior reinforcement of doing those things, and then it would be cultivated back into their own life. But I don't know, how it sounds, but that was something that I was thinking as like how to make it also cool to show, or maybe showing shocking stuff, but in a different way. I love the idea of the lungs with the smoking that is shocking, but it also does show some like, benefit in that sense.
Yeah, so I agree. So if kids were to go the campaign route, I think that there's certainly a need to have it be shocking to some degree, or again, bring it back to the humor. Like I said earlier, they do like memes. So creating a contest where they come up with some sort of meme, something like that. So it's not, certainly not impossible, again, challenging, but I can certainly see the value in going that route. But yeah, so either the humor or the shock value, I think, are two things that are sort of necessary to kind of get kids' attention. The other thing that I didn't mention, but I also think is important, is when we think about a campaign, doing a campaign over social networking sites, we have to think about the timing of the campaign. So there's so much that kids are scrolling through on their phones or on their mobile devices. So if you do any sort of campaign, I suspect it's going to be a pretty short-term campaign. So I don't suspect you could do this type of campaign and really expect it to sustain over a long period of time.
Right.
So again, it might have to be something that's around, you know, prom season or an event that's important to kids. So kind of thinking about that as well.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Perlman and see if, Deborah, do you have any comments or questions for Haley? I can't hear Deborah, so I guess we will carry on. So,
Well,
oh.
maybe I can add something now that you can actually hear me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lisa.
So let me know whenever some problems arise, but I'll try to be concise. So first of all, yes, I did research that involved focus groups that started from me just wanting to know people's opinion about an issue, and then I realized that our conversations serve an educational purpose, so I can totally relate to that, and I'll be happy to talk to Haley more about it outside of this webinar, because it's a long story. And I was also thinking, as you were talking about how kids don't like attracting attention to the wrong issue. So I actually recently had focus groups on a different occasion when students in Central Connecticut State University produced videos as part of dating violence campaign, like against anti-violence, and I asked them whether they're going to share these videos on Facebook or Twitter, and many of them said that they don't really feel comfortable about that, right? So I was thinking a lot about that too, and I think that's an issue of their understanding of civic engagement, and I personally think that it's really important to help them to work with them to help them understand the importance of this kind of involvement. So again, I would love to continue this conversation outside of the webinar or now. Ray, you heard me. That's awesome.
That was fascinating, and of course now it makes me wonder. Then, so based on Lisa's, fascinating observation, Haley, it makes me wonder: does it really matter whether kids share the social media prevention messages that they create? What's his name? Peter Levine wrote an article a few years back about the audience problem with youth media, which is essentially that kids would invest a lot of time to make a pro-social media message, but it wouldn't find an audience. It would be screened for the few people who were directly involved in it, and it wouldn't find an audience. And I think there is a debate in the youth media community about whether youth media has to find an audience for the full potential educational value of the experience to be realized. Some people say, actually it could be really valuable experience and transformative for the youth involved, even if it doesn't reach an audience, even if they don't share it on their social networks. What are your thoughts about the idea that maybe kids could create prevention memes or videos or messages, and is their value really only in the spreadability or shareability, or might there be value? Might there be a change of attitudes or behaviors that result from the experience of composing and creating those messages?
Renee, I didn't catch all of that because my internet, I think, froze for a minute. But I think that from what I did capture, so I think that creating the message certainly as itself serves as an intervention. And I think so that would almost be the person creating in some ways is almost like a primary audience. You create the message, you receive the message, and then the actual disseminating, it's almost like now there's a secondary audience getting the intervention. So I think that, you know, there certainly could be value, and I think there is a lot of value if you can get the message out there. Again, thinking about if these kids were comfortable sharing their messages, it's this idea that they endorse this idea and, you know, being a positive role model for other kids their age. So I think that there's value from just creating the message, but also value from disseminating the message as well. In terms of, so getting back to what Lisa had said earlier, so Lisa, I'd love to chat sometime. I've actually thought about applying this concept to dating violence. I come from a feminist background. So the idea of taking this concept and applying it to a dating violence campaign, I was really actually, I was interested in initially. And thinking about, you know, earlier I talked about barriers and facilitators of kids wanting to participate in an anti-substance prevention campaign. But I suspect that there could be some different barriers if we had asked kids to participate in a dating violence campaign. So there may be young women or young men or whomever that are hesitant to post some of those messages because maybe they have people they've dated in the past, or maybe they've been assaulted with, that are also still part of their networking site. So there's that idea of, you know, are you going to upset someone that you've previously dated? So again, kind of this idea of, I think some of the concepts I talked about today could be generalizable to a different topic area, but I also think there are some important differences that would also need to be considered as well.
I think that's a really great point, Haley, and I think it also speaks to this idea that and it's kind of what Paul said at the very beginning, just pointing out that there are barriers. That in itself is a pretty big insight. And you're right, the barriers and attitudes that are going to get in the way of people willing to share are going to be different for different issues. But there's a lot to be said for deepening our understanding of conditions under which people will share or not. Now, I wanted to see if Zoe had anything to say, because amongst all of us, perhaps Zoe is the most active at using social media to share media. It might be a tie between Zoe and Yanti at this point. Both of them pretty highly active in sharing through social media your creative work as YouTubers and as media makers.
I'm like more towards the exploratory kind of like new social media, like towards Instagram or Snapchat. You mentioned about the identity of those kids and their kind of conception of their role model kind of identity towards their peers, towards others. I was wondering if there is any type of celebrity effect. And you also mentioned about, you know, if someone's asked by a campaign or an organization, there's lack of authenticness. But I was wondering if there is some sort of kind of kids kind of social networking celebrity effects that can actually motivate kids to get kids engaged, or their their creation of a campaign and actually get more kids engaged and without much of a regression, because they are kids and they're in their community, other than being some sort of manipulated by the adult kind of community. Does that make sense?
What a great question. Celebrities. What do you think, Haley?
Yeah, so I think that certainly could be helpful. I think the challenge comes in terms of resources. Mm-hmm. So I think that certainly a celebrity, if you could get a celebrity on board, I think kids would probably be more than excited, especially depending on who the celebrity is. there were references to Kim Kardashian in one of my focus groups.
Yeah, and
Talking
yeah,
about,
mhm.
go ahead.
No, definitely. Like celebrities, like Kim Kardashians. But what about YouTubers on YouTube or whiners on Vine, or like there are some sort of Snapchat stars that is from the grassroots community. They actually kind of doing that kind of campaign. Are they more authentic than the big?
You broke up a little bit, but I
Does that make sense?
think it could be my internet connection. But I think what I heard is you asking, are some of like the YouTube celebrities, so the grassroots celebrities, are they seen as more authentic versus a movie star celebrity if we were to get them involved in a campaign? Am I along the right lines? Okay. Yeah, so I think that that's actually a really great idea. And I think that kids would certainly be engaged in that depending on who the person was. But yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I want to say just relating to your question before Renee, I feel that, again, the media production person talks, is that I feel that there is a big value to create without an audience, to learn the craft of creating messages and helping with analyzing messages. But as somebody I know in media literacy that says that the 5 competencies include also reflection and action, I feel that if it's not being shared with authentic audience, you're not creating civic action. So, and you won't be really media literate. So you might know how to produce and how to analyze, but then the whole point of the prevention with taking an action and being socially responsible, and even if you've been through something, whatever something that you've been and you feel ashamed or you feel that you don't want to hurt somebody, like part of it to how to convey your message to get it across, and your duty to be part of the community. So that was my part as the media production, that I do think it needs to be shared with an audience.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too, in the sense, if we educate kids about, not posting certain messages, there's got to be sort of a secondary piece. When you do post messages, be thinking about your audience, be thinking about how you want to brand yourself, what your online identity is looking like, and what that's going to look like down the road. So I think that it's a 2-piece process. So understanding what not to post, and then also understanding what to post and how you want to convey yourself in a way that's going to be positive, short-term and long-term.
Haley, I think this has got the potential to be a really groundbreaking line of inquiry that's going to have a lot of impact in the prevention community. And it's exciting to see how strategic you are about this formative work and how much you're learning from this sample of urban, mostly Latino teens. We will be looking forward to another opportunity to talk with you about the research as it moves forward when you are completed the journey. But we're really grateful that you took time to share your preliminary results with us tonight. So let's give Haley a round of applause.
Here, here.
Applause.
Thank you,
There we
Haley.
go. Really delighted to see the progress that you're making on this project. Happy to have a dialogue with the members of the Media Education Lab, and then by us sharing this online, we hope others will join this learning community as well. So on behalf of all of us at the Media Education Lab, I want to say thank you to Haley and good night. We'll all wave goodbye to each other now. Goodbye. Oh, wait. Before you go, let me just make a slight one minute of announcement. Our last and final Media Smart seminar for the spring semester is coming up. It's next hold on, let me just check this out. It is next, when is it? It is next Tuesday, May 31st, with Frank Baker from the Media Literacy Clearinghouse in South Carolina. It's going to be 50 of the best media literacy books for children. So librarians and educators and parents might want to know, what are those books you need to have on your bookshelf if you want to convey media literacy through print picture books and chapter books and young adult novels. So hopefully you'll join us for that next Tuesday, May 31st. Anyway, thanks again for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Haley.
Bye.
Bye, Paul.
Bye.